be bringing you our continuing education and tools and things that are going to make you better professional realtors. We have online today and we're Facebook Live. So some of the rules for today, if you have questions, please text them or put them in the chat, and then Joanna will feed them back. Brent will repeat the question and then do his best to answer them. There'll be some PDF and supporting documents for you. So we're very, very happy today to talk about title. How do you take title? All of those wonderful things. And Brent can answer any questions about title that you want. So you get the next half hour with Brent, right here behind me, Brent Wood with Omni Southwest Florida. He's going to tell you a little bit about the title company and some exciting things that they have for you, not just title. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
Thank you. Good morning. So my name is Brent Wood with Omni Title of Southwest Florida, local title agency here. We have an office in Fort Myers, right by Jones and Company, actually, off Colonial and De Leon. And then just by coincidence, our Cape Coral office is walking distance from here as well, off of 1222 Southeast 47th Street. And today I just want to talk to you guys about when you have buyers, how they want to take title, and also out of those 6 ways to take title that are most used here in Florida, what that means, and then you can save these sheets so that you can use it as a reference when you have buyers and they ask you. One thing for me as a title agent is, unfortunately, when a buyer asks me how they should take title, that's not really a question that I can answer for them. I can tell them the different ways that they can, but I don't want to tell them how to do it just in case down the road it was the wrong way, and then they come back to us. A licensed attorney could tell them how to as well if they want to sit down, or an accountant as well, to figure out what way they want to take title. But we're just going to jump right in. I don't know if this class is going to be a full 30 minutes, but I'll try to be as thorough as possible. As JJ said, this form is PDF. You can email it to you guys. You can save it. You can use it anytime in the future because these things really aren't going to change. So, you know, they're good for the longevity of however long we have buyers. So there's 6 common ways to take title in Florida. And it says on here, even for experienced home buyers, the final stages of property closing can normally be a time of trepidation. We all know that. Everyone's stressed. The lender's behind. You know, we're all just getting to the closing date. We're trying to do it as quickly as possible. But one of the most commonly overlooked segments of the closing process is how the buyer is going to take title on their new home. And unfortunately, you know, if a buyer is not educated on how to do so, or that they can do it in different ways other than, you know, just themselves taking title, we want to make sure that we do it right the first time when they close, so that we don't have to do quick claim deeds in the future, or they realize that there was an accounting thing where they should have taken title this way and they didn't know. So for me, I take a lot of pride in my agency in educating both buyers and sellers on why we do certain things, what the ramifications of those things can be, and also I can get them in contact with accountants and attorneys if they have questions about a trust and other things like that. So when a residential real estate purchase closes, the title interest in the property is vested in the name of the buyer. We all know that. That's easy. One of the most common questions we receive from residential purchases, though, from buyers relates to the best way for them to vest title. And like I was saying before, I love to educate them on how they can, these 6 ways that they can, but I can't directly tell them this is how you should do it, because every single case is unique and we don't want to lead them the wrong way. So the 6 ways that you can take title, the most common ways, we're not going to go through all the very 1 in a million type ways, but these are the 6 most common here in Florida. And you have sole ownership, joint ownership is tenants in common, joint tenancy with rights or survivorship, tenancy by the entirety, ownership through an entity such as a corporation or an LLC, and ownership through a trust. So like I said, we're gonna walk through what these mean, what it means for your buyer, and then in the future, when you sit down with them, you can really educate them on what the best way for them to vest the title in when they make their purchase. So the first one we're going to go over today is the sole ownership, right? And that one's pretty self-explanatory. This is for unmarried people Those who are legally divorced and married people who wish to hold the property in their own names use this type of ownership. A lot of times, or if a married couple is purchasing an investment property, they can have it in only the husband or the wife's name. On homesteaded property, we always encourage them to take title as a married couple. And I'll explain why we do that when we get a little closer. But on second homes or on investment properties, it's completely fine for a married couple, for one of them to take title and the spouse not to be on title, if that's how they want it, for tax purposes or whatever way they would like to have it that way. So it says, if a married person takes title in his or her own name and the property benefits from a homestead exemption, Florida homestead laws require the other spouse to sign the deed for the transfer or otherwise formally relinquish rights to the property. So that's what I was saying. For a home that they're both going to live in, they both need to be on title, or one person needs to take title as a married couple if they're going to file for the Florida homestead exemption, which obviously we would want them to if it applies. Save on some taxes there. So then usually a spouse who invests in real estate properties may do so without the involvement of the other spouse, simply by executing an affidavit or a quitclaim deed relinquishing any ownership or interest in the property. And that's what I was saying for second homes, for investment properties. It's okay for the husband to take title, the wife to take title without the other spouse being on there. We actually see that pretty frequently for investment properties that come through. And then the last paragraph here under sole ownership. While sole ownership provides buyers with the most simplistic option for solitary ownership of a piece of residential real estate, it lacks any tax or estate planning benefits. And what it means by that is, for instance, when a sole owner passes away, the solely owned property remains subject to the lays because it has to go through probate, which will obviously cost a lot more too. So, you know, if you're a married couple and you take, I am the only one on the deed, but it says Brent Wood, a married man. If something were to happen to me because of that wording on the deed, it goes directly to my wife Jennifer. Versus if I took title just Brent Wood, I wouldn't say a single man because I'm not single. But that's,
better not.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why that wording is so important on deeds, so that if something were to happen to one of the spouses, it doesn't have to go through probate. That's months and months of paperwork. It's going to cost, you know, $10,000, you know, for them to get everything through, because the state and the courts don't know who owns that property now, whether it's their children, a brother. You can have uncles say that verbally he said the property was mine, so that's why it has to go through all probate to figure out who owns it after somebody passes. So we're going to jump down to our next one here. This is joint ownership as tenants in common. Okay, and this is when any number of individuals can hold title under joint ownership as tenants in common, with the share of the property depending on a person's contributions. So if you have $100,000 property and 5 people want to be on the title, right? Each one would put 20,000. That equals 100,000. Each person would have that ownership. But you can also do different ways. Somebody could put 60,000, then they own 60% of it, and then the others fall in line with however much they contribute to the property. And that can be as many individuals as they want. Also in this form of ownership, each owner has the right to sell, lease, or give away at any death interest in the property to his or her legal heirs. So that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. The good part is, if you bought 20,000 into a property and something happened to you, your heir can go ahead and take that ownership of the property with the other individuals. But here's the downside. Well, let's go to the next paragraph. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead. Tenancy in common is used when 2 or more individuals who are not married to each other take title to real property. Each tenant in common owns a specified interest in the property that may not necessarily be equal shares. However, the percentage of ownership of each tenant in common is usually specified on the deed, and it'll break out the ownership of each one who's on the deed taking title for that scenario. So since there is no right of survivorship in this form of ownership, One of the main advantages of owning real property in this manner is that each tenant in common may pass his or her interest in the property via a will to whoever they choose. And that's why I was saying before, if I wanted to invest in a property with the other 4 people, I put 20,000 in, I own 20%, something happens to me in my will, I give it to my wife, and then she, we didn't spend that 20,000 for no reason. She now owns that interest. However, which is a good thing, but the downside to that, there's 2 sides to each coin. This also leads to the greatest disadvantage. Tenants in common may end up co-owning property with complete strangers. Consequently, if the tenants are ever found themselves at odds to the property, with someone to the property, one party may bring a partition lawsuit against the other to sell the property. Another disadvantage that may arise is that this form of ownership may also lead to one tenant's creditor levying on a co-tenant's undivided interest to satisfy a debt owed. So basically what that means is, if I go in to buy that property with 4 of my buddies, one of my buddies passes, his heir, or whoever he gave that interest to on his will, could be somebody that I don't get along with, somebody that's unreasonable. We all decide that we want to sell the property. That person does not want to sell. We can't force them to sell, and they still have that ownership. So we would have to file a suit against them to go ahead and convey title, sign the deed off for us to sell. So that's one of the downsides is you could end up owning a property with somebody that you did not ever think that you would own that property with. And let's face it, people don't get along with other people, that could cause a big problem. I mean, that could happen. So there's good things to this one, and there's bad things as well. Let's go ahead and move on to our next one. This one's joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And under this type of ownership, all joint tenants have equal rights to their share of the property. In addition, due to the right of survivorship, which is not present for tenants in common, when a joint tenant dies, his or her share is automatically distributed among the remaining joint tenants. There are no restrictions on the number of persons that can be joint tenants under joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You're on there with rights of survivorship. Somebody passes away, then the people that are still on there, they have that interest in it. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship provides an alternative option to tenancy in common and is often used amongst close family members who prefer to keep the ownership interest of the property within their family. Under such ownership, all co-owners must have taken title at the same time and share equal interest in the property. Further, since each joint tenant has a right of survivorship, when one passes away, that joint tenant's rights pass to the other joint tenants. This avoids many of the disadvantages encountered with tenancies in common, including probate costs, since the surviving tenant usually only needs to record an affidavit of survivorship and provide a death certificate to clear title to prove that they have the right of survivorship. The other owner passed away, now they have all the rights of that. However, in lien theory states such as Florida, one joint tenant mortgaging his or her own interest in the subject property effectively destroys the joint tenancy, leaving the lender with a mortgage on only a partial interest of the property. The other joint tenant's interests will not be affected. Accordingly, joint tenancy with right of survivorship imposes its own set of unique challenges if incorrectly utilized. So, I mean, the main points of this one is, if you want it to stay in your family, you're buying it with family members versus as an investment or something like that. It could be an investment in family, but if somebody passes, that you're going to keep that property. You're not going to have a stranger be able to have that any percentage in it, and that is better for a long term, just so that you don't have any disagreements with somebody that owns that property with you. The next one here that we're going to talk about is tenancy by the entirety. This option is available only to married couples and allows the couple to hold title in the name of both spouses. Both the husband and wife have equal possession rights to the property. When one spouse dies, his or her share is automatically distributed to the surviving spouse. That's just like, as I was saying before, if you take it as a married couple, if something happens to the husband, the wife automatically takes title as the spouse. There are several advantages to tenancy by its entirety. First, it protects the asset. For example, A creditor is pursuing a judgment against one spouse. Second, it offers control over how the property is disposed of. Unlike joint tenancy with right of survivorship, tenancy by the entirety requires both parties to sign a deed transferring any interest of the property. You know, like where before you could have one person sign off only their interest of the property, and then a stranger could come in and own the 20% if it was the $100,000 example we gave. Third, one spouse cannot gift his or her interest in real estate without the consent signature of the other spouse. So that's fair. Like I said, you're not going to be ever owning the property with a stranger or somebody you didn't think you own it with. This protects the other spouse from unknowingly losing any interest in the property. Tenancy by the entirety ownership of real property can only be created between individuals who are married to each other at the time of the property is required. In this case, each spouse holds an equal and identical interest, as the other cannot be severed so long as both spouses are alive and remain married. That's key. Similarly, to joint tenants with right of survivorship, each spouse's interest passes to the other upon death. However, creditors of one spouse alone may not attach to the property. If the spouses ultimately divorce, therefore destroying the main factor needed for tenancy by the entirety, then the parties are considered to own separate but undivided interest in the subject property, like with tenants in common. So for something like that, if you had a married couple, they buy a property, they're going through a divorce, they get divorced. One spouse could not come to me to sell the property without the other spouse's signature on the deed as well.
You
Yes.
often require like a court order or something to show that.
Yes, correct. So a lot of times what will happen is if they are separated or they're finalizing a divorce, I reach out to the divorce attorney. I ask them to provide me how they're going to split the asset. That's the number one thing, is they want to know, how is the money being split? Is it 50-50? Is one spouse paying off has other payoffs? But to answer JJ's question, yes, I either get it from the court or I get it from their attorney to show me how to disperse funds, once we close. Our office does a really good job. We've had multiple of those last year. We make sure that if they don't want to be in the same room together, they don't want to speak together. We completely understand that. We do a really good job of keeping them separate.
I think what's great with you guys is you have Jen and you have you. You know, you're two different personalities.
Right.
You're a married couple that works well together, but like Jen can take care of the women, you can take care of the men. Your personalities fit different, and sometimes it's flip flop. Sometimes the women want to be taking care of the men, and the men want to be taking care of the women. But like they feel like they've got two people each on their side, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, and we would do that without even noticing that that's how we did it. But like you said, I mean, somebody likes my personality versus Jen has a lot of qualities that I don't have, and she's very good at calming people down. We've only had 2 or 3 last year where it was a really nasty separation. So, but it happens, and our office accommodates as best as we can for every party involved. I don't want to be involved in it just as much as they don't want to. So we do a really good job of keeping them separate and everything. So those are the 4 as a person. Right, if you were taking title as a person or with other people. These last 2 here is ownership through an entity. So we're talking about LLCs, incorporations, nonprofits, and ownership with a land trust. When we get to the trust part, I do need to disclose I'm not a licensed attorney, so I do have an attorney that works with us that can help anybody build a trust, help anybody explain a trust. If anyone ever needs that, I can put you in contact with them, no problem. I just can't build any trust for people because I'm not a licensed attorney. But first, we're going to go through ownership through an entity. And then rather than own a property as people, owners may choose to acquire it through a separate legal entity, such as a corporation or an LLC. Corporations and LLCs can have any number of shareholders or members, but rights to the property of individual shareholders or members will be limited to face value of the shares or members' interest each person holds. So what they're talking about there is, when I have an LLC, which we have many investors, many LLCs or corporations that are either purchasing property or selling property. When I say an LLC is selling property, First thing I need to make sure is the LLC is still active through the state of Florida or whatever state they're selling it from. And then I need to ask them for their operating agreements because I need to see who's an officer, who's a manager, who's allowed to, number one, convey title, right? We wouldn't want the receptionist for a big company to sell a property of that company without the owners know. So we need to find who's a manager, who's an officer, who can convey title. And then also if there's multiple people on that LLC, we need to figure out what their ownership is so that when we disperse funds, we can correctly disperse the right amount to each person. Some it's just one LLC owned by one person. We've had some where there's 5 people and the interests are different depending on what their role is in the LLC. But I'll repeat really quick, when you're working with somebody that's a seller from an LLC, just give them a heads up that the title company is going to need to make sure that the LLC is still active. And is also going to need the operating agreement, which will lay out exactly who can sign the deed and how much percentage each person needs when we disperse funds. And that's very important to have that operating agreement. And to be honest, some LLCs are so small, they don't even have an operating agreement. Not a big deal. If it's one LLC owned by one guy, who's the managing member and the officer, obviously he has 100%, he can sign, we're all good. This is for bigger corporations that have multiple employees, multiple managers and officers. Let's see. Title to Florida property also may be held in the name of a partnership of 2 or more persons. Partners would have equal right to possession of their respective share of the property. That's pretty self-explanatory. However much you own of the company, you're buying a property, that whatever percentage you have in that company is the percentage of ownership you have in the property. Given that you're paying, if you own 75% and buying property, you need to pay 75% of the property. The remaining 25 would be paid by the other person. That's how we disperse it when we close as well. So LLCs, corporations, super easy for our office to do. We've done it many times, over 40 times probably in the last 6 months. A lot of investors, a lot of LLCs. As long as they have the correct paperwork, it's just as smooth as a regular sole ownership property sale. Very easy for us to handle. The last one, or should I say the last most common out of the most common 6 here in Florida, is ownership through a land trust. And finally, title may be held in the name of a Florida land trust in which the legal title of the property is transferred to a trustee for the benefit of the named beneficiaries. This form of title offers privacy because the deed does not state who the owner is or the amount of the purchase. So that's, I don't think we've ran across one where the owner didn't want people to know that they owned it, but I would definitely have your customer speak to an attorney and an accountant, see if the best bet is to put it in a trust. The trust and the one above it, the entities, those kind of are similar in the fact that if a trust is selling a property and we're doing that closing, we need a copy of the trust, which I read, and I make sure that the trustee can sign to convey property, but also trust can have language in there like the family attorney needs to sign the deed as well, because maybe the parents don't want the children to be able to sell the property out of the trust unless the accountant or the attorney looks at it. So a trust is basically put in place to keep people not honest, but it just gives a layout of what the stipulations are if they were to sell the property, who needs to sign for it, how much ownership is for whoever the trustees are. So it's very important that we get a copy of the trust. We had one about 9 months ago. They were selling it from a trust. The trust was created in the 60s. The attorney that created the trust was now a judge. He didn't have any records of the trust when they created it. So unfortunately, we're kind of stuck because they took title as the trust. Now nobody has a copy of the trust, so nobody knows the stipulations to it and who can actually convey the property. So with that one, for instance, we had to do a release and cancellation for meanwhile, while they try to get to that judge, ask him for that, or redo the trust again. So it's very important that if you have buyers that are purchasing property in trusts. I know it sounds silly. Please make sure they save it multiple times. Put it in their safe, send it to a family member to save, whatever it is. Because if you lose a copy of that thing, you're not in trouble, but you can't really move on anything until it's either found or rewritten from a title standpoint. Because my underwriter refused to insure it because we don't know if the people are actual trustees or if they're just saying, saying, and that could give rise to a claim. We don't want that. We don't want that for them. We don't want that for the buyers, and I don't want it for us either. So that's just very important that when you have buyers buying in trust, that they have an attorney that is very versed on it, can do it properly, and that everyone saves it once they're done doing it. I can't stress that enough. Closing agents for this type will need the original trust before closing to ensure those taking title or trustees or have the ability to convey title down the road. A copy of the trust will also confirm the closing agent who needs to sign off for the property to be sold and conveyed to another. Some trusts do not want property to be sold, so they put stipulations in the trust where multiple people need to sign off to convey title. That's the example I was giving. If parents have multiple properties, they want their grandchildren to have them, they will put stipulations in that trust that the children cannot sell it without so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so signatures, and they know that they're not going to sign off so that it can stay in the family for generation to generation. So that's it. Those are the 6 most common ways. As I said before, I can't tell anybody how to do it, but I have no problem talking to a buyer, explaining what each one means, and they can either get an outside source to confirm exactly how they want to do it, or usually when I tell them the ramifications and benefits from each, they typically say, okay, I want it this way, or if I pass, I want my wife to have it. So it's once they know what each means, it's pretty easy for them to decide what specifically they want for that property. So are there any questions?
Yeah, are you seeing a trend in like a different type of, aside from the common way that people have taken title, which is either single or married, are you seeing like a trend in different types of title? Or the way people are taking title, just the same as normal?
That's a really good question, but the only thing that we do see, which I didn't think. So if you're with somebody for 15 years, right, and you have children together and you live together, that's great, but you have to be legally married through the state of Florida to be able to take title as a married couple. I know that sounds silly, but we've had a handful of people wanting to take title as a married couple because they've been together for so long, but they're not legally married.
I'm hearing a lot of people who are my age that have been together for like 10 years. It's a millennial trend. We're not getting
Correct.
Married, and they keep saying, "Oh, we're common law married." But in the realm of title, like where does that land? Nowhere, right?
No, you're saying. And I don't like saying that to them because I don't want to disrespect them and saying like,
Yeah.
well, I know you've been together for so long, but legally you're single. But that's when we would go and tell them about the rights of survivorship, where if something happened to the one, then it would immediately vest to the other. That's the main importance of how people take titles, so that when things happen and somebody passes away, the children or whoever was going to get the property, they don't have to go through all the probate.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier just to do it the right way as soon as you purchase it, and then never have to worry about it again. You won't have to go through probate. They won't have to pay all these extra costs. But I see a lot of those from land deals in Lehigh, where people bought them in the 80s. They took them as sole ownership. That person has passed. The children are trying to sell it. You're selling a lot for $7,000, and it's costing you $10,000 for probate.
Yeah.
And you're losing. They're like, well, we're not even going to sell it.
Yeah.
Because if we have to pay $10,000 or however much it would be to get to probate, that's a high estimate. But for a $7,000 lot, it doesn't make sense. But for my wife and I, when we take title, we want to make sure that if anything happens to either of us or in the future, our children don't have to fight all of those things to get the property.
Yeah, what we're seeing a lot of lately with the Gen X generation mostly is a lot of them are on their second or third marriage, and they've got mixed and blended families from previous marriages. And a lot of issues coming into place as far as wanting to make sure that their spouse is protected if they die, that their kids aren't trying to fight this, that's not my real mom, that's not my real dad. They're trying to take the house away from the spouse that's left, but also at the same time, the spouses are trying to protect themselves from each other because they've been through multiple marriages. And it's like, at that point, they're trying to figure out how to take title as far as, well, I want to make sure if something happens to me, it goes to my spouse, but I don't want my spouse to have control over it. So whose name do I put it in? And are you guys having a lot of those conversations?
They haven't come up a crazy amount in my office. My office is kind of like bread and butter, like your $350,000 house and that stuff. But I can see how that could start, occurring more often.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen a lot of them come through mine, but I can see how that definitely could happen. But that's why
I think that covers most of the subjects. They're just asking for the handouts. So if you guys didn't see the comment, we're going to put the handout in app files for you so that you can access it as well.
Yeah, and then for anybody who's attended, we have a gift card. We can do a wrap. We can do a drawing at the end of the week. Whoever sends their email to me will just $25 Amazon gift card.
Okay.
But other than that, it's not rocket science how to take title, but if your buyer doesn't know, they don't know, and then we want to just make sure up front they have all the information, they have education and information, so that 3 years down the road they're not like, why didn't that guy tell me to do it? Because quitclaim deeds and all that stuff, we can just do it the right way. And like I said, my office is very good at educating people. Title work is very boring, but I make it a little fun to explain to them because we take a lot of pride in what we do and want to do it the right way for everybody.
Yeah, so called and asked if we can come over and take a tour of their offices because they're really cool, meet the staff and all the good stuff. And by the way, Brent and I are on the 2021 championship bowling team for the District 5 bowling. So we're going to be doing it again and representing our association at the end of April. We hope you come out to Headpins in Fort Myers and support us.
Oh, and really quick.
Yes.
I'm throwing an event tomorrow at a place called Link, LINQ. It's off Sutherland by Galisano. It's a very cool place. We reserve the entire outside, free drinks, free appetizers, and some other food. And tomorrow happens to be my birthday too. So,
just a coinky dink, right?
Yeah. So we would love for you guys to come. It's from 4 to 6, but I'm sure it'll go a little longer after 6. But it's a realtor appreciation night. Everything's on us. We just want to meet you guys. We know how hard it's been in the last year. We just want you to relax and, have some free drinks because I'm sure some of y'all will.
Thank you.
Thank you
We've got a
guys.
great group here to help you succeed and do better. So watch the educational schedule because we've got great things all month. Peace out.